If you don't mind, I'd like to give a little preface for what we're going to be talking about today, kind of a little bit of a summary. So previously, it was a few years ago now, had you here on the Entheogenic Evolution podcast, and we talked about the Yuta Tnoho Codex. And we were talking about its relationship to Quetzalcoatl, the concept of the deified heart, and of course, work with psilocybin mushrooms in Mesoamerican cultures. And so we're going to be talking more about this today and kind of giving a new reading on the whole thing. So I wanted to sort of briefly summarize what this new reading is and why it's significant for understanding this document. And you're going to give us lots more details about all of this, so I'm just going to be brief and summarize. But basically, what we're working with here, and we're going to be showing this image in the video that we're making, and I'll also be using it as the cover for just the audio podcast so that people can just look at the cover, and we'll also make it available elsewhere for people to get. But the idea is that this codex, these images that we're going to be talking about, this is not a language. These are not glyphs. These are not symbols. This is not something to be read. This is not something to be deciphered, but it's more of a living representation that when mushrooms are consumed in a specific way, which you're going to be talking about, that these images then become like vibratory emanations that can then enter one into a visionary experience of interacting with Quetzalcoatl, interacting with Tlaloc, interacting with these various deities, which we're not saying that these are just archetypes in the collective unconscious of humanity, but actually that they are emanations from the mushrooms themselves, that this is a mushroom dependent experience. And for those who regularly listen to the podcast, this is what Jessica Marie was sharing about from her experience with you of taking the mushrooms in this specific way that you're going to be sharing about, looking at the images on the codex, looking at the images on the paper where they started to vibrate and then they emerged out of the codex itself and then entered her into a complete visionary experience where then it is an interactive space with these vibratory forms and emanations. And so that's kind of the snapshot of what we're going to be talking about today, and you will provide the clarifications and corrections to anything that I perhaps mischaracterized.
Somebody said, let's go to Walla de Manos and try to save Maria Sabina. Yeah, and I said, I'll end up in a Mexican jail. And he said, no, we can do it. I've got a slip from some government agency for a day. We can be there. No, I don't want to do that. I said, okay, I'll throw the I Ching, and I threw the I Ching. And it came out I should go. And I said, I'm going to throw it again. I threw it again. And you won't even believe this, even the changing numbers come up. And that's where I met my wife. But I met her at basically the ceremony with Maria Sabina. We went up with about 2 or 3 other people super, super early in the morning. And it took a long time to climb up there. They call that place the Eagle's Nest. She's way up higher almost than anybody else on the way to the Sacred Hills. And all this rain and stuff. And so we got up there, and we agreed that night to do a ceremony with Maria. Maria and her family agreed to it. And believe it or not, there's only one person that spoke Spanish, a little kid. All of Maria's children only spoke Mazatec. But she had a grandson that spoke Spanish. And so we could speak Spanish to the grandson.
And he would translate for you guys?
He would tell us what his mother was saying.
Yeah.
Or his grandmother was saying. Because he knew Mazatec, which is a tonal language. You know what a tonal language is, right?
Yes, I'm familiar.
You're a musician. You got to know what a tonal language is. Her daughter really participated Apollonia. Apollonia would be making sounds of birds. She'd be making sounds of rain falling. But the biggest thing, and I can't express it to this, and this is going to sound almost sacrilegious, but it'd be like sometimes encouraging her mother, like a sports fan telling their favorite team or player to get it on, play hard, just like almost like she was saying, shamatize, mama, shamatize. And she would dance, and she'd do ventriloquy. But the most amazing thing was when she first came around to each one of us, she would practice again and again till she could say our name just like we said it. Now, this is the most amazing thing in the world. But the last time I was looking at her eyes, closer than you'd almost like nose to nose, and I'm a hillbilly from Northeast Tennessee, right? Very few people sound like me, like the people from Northeast Tennessee. When she said it that last time, it was like, I'm not sure. I thought I said it. I'm not kidding you. I'm not kidding you. It sort of jerked me. You have a little body jerk.
Yeah.
And it was like a recognition. And that night you could hear different names bouncing around in the ethers of the person's name. And it sounded like they had said it. I think it has to do with breath, understanding your breath, and your breathing, like when you say your name. And I guess when you say your name, to you, I don't know, that's a lot of subjects we could go off into, but the most ancient things was to say your name, your breath. That was to say like the name of God. And a lot of religions, everybody knew what that name was, but in certain ceremonies, only like the shaman or the curandero could say the name. It wasn't just supposed to be said so anybody heard it but the members of the tribe. That's how the Huichols are.
So was this your first introduction to psilocybin mushrooms with Maria Sabina?
Oh, no. I'd eaten mushrooms with Mayans over in near Palenque.
So you got introduced then to the psilocybin mushrooms before the work with Maria Sabina. At what point, I think it's safe to say at this point that you are very devoted to sharing information about psilocybin mushrooms, and particularly the context in which they are used in Mesoamerican cultures. You're very interested in sort of these ancient lineages and ancient practices. At what point did you decide that this was going to be your focus, that this is what you wanted to do and what you wanted to communicate to the world about?
I think I just have. I haven't ever really thought. I've just felt what I've told a lot of people what I thought was the truth.
Yeah. So when did you take up, for example, the Yuta Tnoho and really start looking at these materials, these, really we could say these archaeological treasures, right? That obviously a lot of the codices, they were burned by the Spanish. They were destroyed. They really tried to suppress the indigenous religion. But some of these things, have survived, such as the Yuta Tnoho Codex. So when did you become interested in these and wanting to study these and understand what they're really about?
Well, after I wrote my first book, I realized like I think you haven't written any books that are worthwhile since your first book. It was such a masterpiece, the one you wrote on mushrooms, okay? I'm just kidding. But I read James Maffey's, saw a couple of videos on him, and I got a couple of books by him and started reading them. And then I had an epiphany. I realized that at 72 years old, I've been talking to some people, just the week before, like Robert Jordan. Okay, I talked to him just a couple of weeks before. We talked about seeing these different types of emanations. And so all of a sudden, I'm reading Maffey, and what he is describing is what you would call the Tamaline male and the Tanalpi females that were mushroom sages' view of reality, called the Tio, or Tio. It's not deified, no capital letter, okay? And there's only been two other, what you'd say, pantheistic, monistic philosophies ever in the world besides this, the Natwa Tio, and that's the Polynesian mana and the Tao Te Ching concept of Chi, the microcosmic orbit, okay, through the center of the body and everything. Well, this part of what's called, there's 40 different type of talents these people had. You can't compare them to anybody you hear about in Europe or the names for things over there. But they had 40 different special talents that a lot of people had when they took sacred mushrooms, or in different ways that they took them, even rubbing them on their skin. And there were some big, huge festivals where they used them. But the Yuta Tnoho Codex, what made it special was when I realized that you have to realize what you're seeing pantheistically is when you're what's called the mushroom to reality. And there's a different concept of time, space, and man and women. And that's why you've got to really, if you don't understand that, you're thinking about it dualistically, and you'll never, and even non-dualism is still coming from Western dualism, right? Monism is like a continuum, just swinging back and forth, but it's always flowing. And see, the thing about it swinging back and forth is like a pendulum swinging back and forth, or maybe a metronome. But the idea is that the sage is balanced, that you're trying to balance your life. That's why men and women weren't really separated. There was a time when they considered women a warrior man and a man a woman. And so there was this thing like, okay, the interaction, we're trying to stay balanced. If I'm a male or I'm a female, then I'm going to try to stay balanced with what I can do. You know what my gifts and talents are, right? There's no beginning, there's no ending, there's no gods. But these when they took Teonanacatl, which was the flesh of the sacrificial blood from Quetzalcoatl, the female male sky dragon, that these children grew from this flesh and blood when lightning hit the earth. See, these traditions go all the way back. As a religion, we know it goes forward because, and I was just down there last year, the Zapotecans are doing more mushrooms in the mountains than they ever did before because they're not afraid of the federales now.
So maybe this is a good time then to explain this concept of the time persons, that just based on what you've shared with me. So this is kind of going back into my little preface and summary, this idea that these are not archetypes, and they're not characters in mythology. For example, the way that we might compare, say, Greek and Roman mythology of, they've got all these gods and goddesses, and we've got all these different stories and these different ceremonies and different ways of worshiping them or whatever. But these are emanations from the mushroom experience themselves. And that
what they're showing you is this is supposed to become alive.
Yeah.
This is Hechachero. The sorcery itself is in when you take the mushrooms, you can send and meditate on these pictures before you take them, or you can take them when you're there, or you can learn to see them, and then you know who you're seeing and what this is about when you're about later. Because James Maffey, who's just retired, a professor emeritus at the University of Maryland, and also studied in anthropology. And recently he did a video, which there's done many, many videos, but I think why you like this video, and you saw that video, is on the talking book, the Causality. He's presented to the entire world that the Nahuas, which included the Mexica, who became the Aztecs, the Mixtecs, the Zapotecs, the Chimechecs, the Mixi, okay, all these Nahua tribal groups, so they all spoke Nahuatl, knew about these sacred books, but were into this concept of what is called the Teo, just like the Chinese were into Tao Te Ching, some of them of the key energy, okay? But they were using mushrooms in temples to try to unmask some of the secrets of reality that had to do with physical healing, and they would progress through physical healing to mental healing or spiritual healing. And this is the thing. It was a type of thing to ignite your spine, to cause your spine to vibrate and your body to start humming. So it's healing itself by the breathing techniques your body's naturally doing, by getting you to breathe deeply and with your blood, to actually use your life force and the life force within the energy to heal your body physically.
And this is exclusively in conjunction with consumption of mushrooms.
Yeah, now sometimes tobacco is rubbed on the skin. Sometimes tobacco is rubbed on the skins. Sometimes dirt's rubbed on the legs like Maria did. Sabina rubbed tobacco on the inner parts of my arms, a poultice from that old stuff, and some dirt on my knees, on both knees. But the thing of it is, in this book, the Yuta Tnoho, it is the only complete creation story that escaped the Spanish fires. Cortez stole this in the encyclopedia, which is a story apart in this book too from Cortez's library. They weren't done by the Mexica, which later became known as the Aztec. They were done by the Mixtec near Oaxaca, near two cities, based on a sacred ceremonial that came from a cave. And what this is on page 24, an ancient sage that's human and really old is asking Quetzalcoatl on a ceremonial throne to give all this knowledge to humans. Will he give all this knowledge to the Mixtecs? Will he give it to humans? And there's two river spirits down there where this sacred cave are, Nuhus, and you'll learn about them later, but they're all going back and forth about, should humans get this? Should they learn about the spirits of the river? Should they learn about the spirits of the land? Should they learn about, these energy spirits, which is like saying learn about a hurricane, an energy thing, a storm coming in. These are energy, motion, power that you can perceive, for healing and other purposes. So they say, yeah, we'll do it. We'll do it. We'll do it. And then in the story, as it goes on, right behind Lord Two Dog, this ancient sage, is Four Lizard, who represents the sacred mushrooms in the earth, the sacred mushrooms coming out, the blood of the earth coming out from the growth below. The Sun Prince, is coming up. In other words, this is a rebirth of the Sun Prince. Now, right behind Quetzalcoatl, you'll see this jaguar on a throne, and that's the throne of the courage, your throne of being alive on this earth and joyous, and the throne of living now, and the courage to go through this ceremony. Now, down below, it's sort of a symbol for eternity down there, which is like the A with the squashed O going through with all those hanging beads right beside the Nuhus, who are beside the river right below Quetzalcoatl. Now, that river, you notice in there, it's wavy, right? Choppy. Mm-hmm. And you notice the guy's hands, there's 3 reeds that are untied. And certain things are floating. Well, this is the idea that your life's not in balance. You're really not in balanced person in life. In other words, you haven't balanced the male-female in you yet. And you're living a life in chaos, and rather than just going with the flow, like maybe so go with the flow, don't get out there and fight the river, whatever. But then the most amazing thing is when you go up to the next scene, where you have Four Lizard, his mushrooms have changed in color. Now, this means something. All these colors represent something. Now, when you see these colors, there's 3 things to remember, really important, okay? One is red and black are the most sacred colors. That means something's really sacred if it's red or black, and together, red and black. Okay, now also, green is representative of things that are bursting with life and coming from life. Wasson in his books made a big thing about the caps all being green, right? Jade green. They represent a special ethnogenic sort of a thing and power. And in the picture, which you're seeing there, he's walking toward the Valley of the Ancient Ancestors. He's pointing above and below Tatala to open up the world of the ancient ancestors. And he's got a staff in front of him floating in the air, and that staff is like made from something when lightning hit the earth, and it's sort of like announcing he's coming into the ancient underworld. And Lady Four Lizard is on his back now, but she's only got 3 mushrooms on her. And in a weaving arc over Quetzalcoatl, you see the actual Four Lizard with a tail swirling back in a quarter of a circle over Quetzalcoatl and Lady Four Lizard, that's mean he's taken the mushrooms and he's gotten with the actual spirit of the mushroom on the back there. That would be like the same as Maria Sabina. In other words, with that knowledge, right? You got knowledge of what this world's about and what you're going to go through. And Quetzalcoatl looking at Talak, which you can shapeshift into. But down below Talak, the green figure is something like corn. You see the corn?
Yeah.
It's sitting on a pedestal. And that corn represents living food life, which the curanderos always told me the sacred mushroom is food just like any other food. We eat mushrooms for food. It is food. Everything is food first. And then the symbol in front of that, you see the A with the little dot?
Yes.
Okay, that's a symbol for the beginning of time. Now, this is crazy because there is no beginning of time and there's no end of time in this thing. It's a constant flow, almost like they talk about in quantum physics or quantum mechanics, a constant flow of flux. But still, it represents the beginning of time. And I think it's like on page 2, it represents the beginning of their time as a people. Okay? That when their elders took this in a cave in a sacred ceremony, and the king was called, here, I'll read this to you. It's really beautiful. The holy avatars of the earth and I, these children were born of light and are the people of light. The people of light are the people of God of light from the consumption of Tamochi. Sacred mushrooms were of enormous importance in the Yuta Tnoho and religious ceremonial rituals of the Mixtecs, Mazatecans, Zapotecans, and the Mayans. And so you see this thing, it was the idea from the first sunrise is a mysterious origin of humans by natural, supernatural forces of deifying their heart to become a real human.
Yeah. So this is about essentially the beginnings of enculturation, of actually moving into a culture with a tradition, with a set of knowledge, a set of practices.
And dynasties with kings and queens, right, and connection between other tribes. And then like the Europeans, that married their cousins and everything, the Mayans and the Anahuac tribes would send one of their daughters to another tribe or a son to another tribe because they felt like the intermarrying of the rulership between the tribes, the dynasties of kings and queens and that stuff would keep there from being wars and keep the peace. This is a story of how these people came from a sacred tree on that river, which is called, some people call it the storytelling river, or the place where the gods came from. Because the first 23 pages are all about the gods in a creation story, and all these, they're spirits of nature. They're not like Egyptian, Roman, Hindu, Christian, Hebrew, nothing like that. They're like energy forces within nature, like the Chinese Tao Te Ching would talk about, or the Polynesian Mana. Well, they could unmask these things and talk to them and be involved with them because they came out of Teonatihuatl. They came out of the mushroom. And that's the most crazy thing. When Matthew was talking to a lot of these women and men that were all on this video, you can see, he was saying at the end, it said that, yeah, they were using mushrooms and they were using Olaki, and there's no doubt that they were using mushrooms and Olaki and peyote. And he said, there's a lot of argument over whether they took the mushrooms and met these talking people, these spirits out in the world, or were these spirits in the plant themselves? And if you took them, you would experience, these people that were unique to this plant. Like, peyote has unique people, mescalero, everything. I've done it a few times. I don't want to talk about it now. But, so these are, I believe, are unique to the plants. And the people that I've told them to take it the way this is shown in this ceremony will tell you it takes you directly to this world for these people to come off this particular page. Now, this was done on deer skin. And very special female and male sages were known as the people who know things, who were also artists, okay? They were chosen to draw these things so they would have a shamanic action when you took mushrooms and look at them, that they would literally become alive off the page, and you could get help from them. You could get things in the spiritual world. You could get healing. You could get more of the divination, but not like people think of it. This happens in the future. More like, okay, these are two rivers in life, and I can tell you what's down this river, and I can tell you what's down this river, but I can't tell you what's going to happen exactly to you on either river. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's a life choices.
Yeah. So if I could just make like a really crude analogy. So again, in looking at these images right here, that we have all this different iconography, we've got all these different figures, but the page itself. So when you take the mushrooms and you're interacting with this page, it's, again, this is a very crude analogy, but it's almost like we're looking at an iPad or some kind of smartphone, and that these are app icons. And then by taking the mushrooms, you're actually clicking on the app icon, and then you're entering into a virtual 3D space where then you are able to interact with these different energies and receive what it is that the potential that they bring, these potentials for, as you say, physical healing, mental healing, and divination, of seeing the pathways of causality that might lead you down one road or another. So that this is like a kind of mushroom technology, in a sense, that becomes interactive. That, like, one of the terms that I've used in my work is that by ingesting entheogens, we're able to enter into our personal interface with the divine, that this opens up the potential to have these kinds of interactions and these kinds of energetic exchanges, and that this is a template for these different beings, these energetic signatures that you might then be interacting with. Does that work as an analogy?
Yeah. If you would be dancing and playing a guitar while you said that as a song, it would be better. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly how they did it, man. They didn't, these things are just incredible. There's one page I want to read you about just a festival that happened in the night, and it's written about by these Mexicans talking about this sacred dark temple of Yodel, where there was what they call at night. They gathered, around there, these different types of priests, male and females, but they prepared a vessel, which is an hallucinogenic ointment, which included scorpions and rattlesnake venom, and from the ashes, and those were all over their body at night. And they put this on there to be able to speak to time persons. But a later stage, we see this when they open what's called a sacred bundle in the plaza, something that's been gathered up sacred and sanctified at their ceremonies in there. And it starts with what's called, in this temple, smoke eyes. It's a trance-like vision with all these black bodies painted, and all they're seeing their eyes, and they're getting ready to go out at night, and they've dropped a little sacrificial blood to the mushrooms into the avatar of Lord Night of the dreams. Now, this dropping of blood on mushrooms was often done just when they were a little dry to pump them up. They actually accept them as water coming into them. And they would take this, and there was a temple called the Temple of the Eagle. And there was a sacred bundle that was taken to a sacred road by priests. And these priests were wizards of both the good and dark side, like you call maybe Christ or the devil, representing the two forces of nature. And at night, they were going to open up this bundle, on the down there. But when they're going out there, they have this guy that's playing a ball game coming out of this temple at night with one of these time persons who represents darkness, one of their wizards, he's going to beat him in a ball game and cast him out from being involved with the festival tomorrow. And all of a sudden, they break open the bundle, and it said divine power broke loose. But the next day, as it comes up, there's a winding serpentine parade through Teotihuacan with people playing drums, dancing, people on mushrooms, and wizards shooting from the top of one temple down into the parade and people shooting back up in fireballs, in an entire mushroom parade celebrating all these different type of deities. But this book, when you get up to it on the line that's the most important, which people talk about all the time, and a lot of people get it wrong. They get certain parts right, but they get certain parts wrong, is Quetzalcoatl has severed the head of death. And I'm not going to say his name because I'd embarrass myself trying to say that long name of the head of death, but he severed the head of death, and he created a special instrument to play during sacred mushroom ceremonies. And he's scraping across the head of death while he's singing the song of the sun. He's selling the celebration of life to come and the song of the sun.
Just to clarify, so this is about the third set of images up the right-hand side of the page? Okay.
Right. Quetzalcoatl is sitting down more flat-like now, and you see right in front of him Xochipilli sitting on a mat in jaguar skin. Now, he has another very special name for him, and he can shape-shift into his sister, Xochipilli, or her back into him. But it's also, he's representing humans. He's a proxy for humans, the same as at the stelas, the Xochicalco, two of them. People argue over whether it's a human face or his face in there. Some people think it's Xochipilli as a proxy. Some people think it's a human face. Well, anyway, he's sitting there with tears in his eyes because this has been given to humans. On the previous page, he was going to see if he could come there and get this to happen. And it was. And you see behind him, one of the Nuhus of the river, the spirits of the river and plants are giving their blessing to this. And the one part I discovered behind it was this particular insect and its little feathers and everything. People thought it was a cricket. It's not a cricket. It's the sacred bee that made the honey in Mexico, what they call a stingless wasp or bee that actually makes this little thin cone of honey. I ate some of this with curandero Francisco Ramirez in the mountains there. But in this ceremony, he's accepting this to go into physical resurrection and rejuvenation and a spiritual rebirth, and to learn about these from these different, and people have talents from this. You mentioned this before. The first thing I should have said after you start talking all about this is the priest and the priestess, the Tonalti women who were priestess in the Tamerlan man, priests, sages and stuff, they considered that dance, music, all these things were better to tell the story. But more importantly, what you said earlier about people, they considered 40 different categories of talents people could get from the mushroom, 40 different talents, all involved in healing and stuff or divination or something like that, that was more like advice sort of thing, like Dear Abby type of advice in a way. Okay, here's what happened to you, Martin, if you go over there. Here's what lies over there. Think about this, blah, 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 without judgment. Because as your life goes forward, there's nobody making any judgment. That's what can blow people away. Nobody's making any judgment. And these are all your friends. And what blows me away is Western people are taught like this duality. Oh my God, there's a monster. Well, if you love them, if you express good feelings, I say it's like finding an old friend to me. They need friends. It's like if you get into Natwa Kurandismo, they don't think like this Freudian thing. They think it's a whole family thing, but they think the relationship with these people, that they need humans. They need humans to honor them. They need to talk to humans, let them know what's going on in the world, They need us and we need them. And so we're going in contations. You're telling them what you want. Almost like, hey, Martin, I want this now, man. This is what I want. I want it. And I really want it. Now, how can I do something? What can I do for you? I brought these flowers. I brought this here to, or out in the world or wherever, it's a type of, you're honoring them and they're honoring you. And they're the connection to certain types of this energy, power, emotion that comes in the body. Now, especially when it's from Quetzalcoatl, the night before in this ceremony, they would take chocolate you know, or they might take it in the morning, you know, all types of cacao really cooked up, you know, because this was to get all the happiness going. I always do that before a ceremony, you know, a lot of chocolate after I do fast for a while, and then I do chocolate. But then when you're getting the sacred mushrooms, there's a lot of ceremonies, blowing trumpets to the east, facing the east, honoring the sun, you know, honoring the four parts of nature just that exist, north, south, east, and west, and whatever's been important to you in your life, you know, that you found. Maybe it was an eagle feather on the road. I don't even know, but whatever's important, you honor those sort of things. And with the mushrooms, and when later at noon or in the evening, sometime when it's decided by the group, start eating the mushrooms with by dipping them in a cup of honey and putting them in your mouth. Keep getting one or two, saying a blessing, putting them in the honey, you know, put them in your mouth. And you chew and you chew and you chew, and you keep your lips up, almost like Xochipilli in the museum in Mexico, and you don't open your mouth. When this happens in your mouth, when it goes to your stomach, and you know all this, we're not going to get into the medical, but 80% gets destroyed in the liver, okay, of what gets through. The small intestines, 80% gets destroyed in the liver. And we know usually 5 or 15% are getting into the bloodstream. Well, this is pure 100% glucose made by your saliva. And honey is immediately absorbed in the body. It doesn't even have to be changed. It can go in as straight glucose and vitamins and all that stuff, you know, from your local flowers. It's the only, you can put it on your skin and it'll go in. Honey does not have to be digested, in other words. It's so pure. Well, when this honey converts and your saliva converts a carbohydrate and alkaloids, that's all a mushroom is carbohydrates and alkaloids. There's no protein there. So they convert that to pure glucose, goes to a maltose first, then the glucose in your gums and the roof of your mouth, send it straight to your brain and your spine. It goes straight back to your spine and straight to your brain. In the inner cheeks of your mouth, what are called parabuccal administration, goes straight to the ventral aorta of your heart. It goes straight to your ventral aorta of your heart to be pumped everywhere in your body. Now you reach a certain point when you keep eating this. I might stop for a second. I'll never spit any out or swallow any unless I'd much rather swallow than spit any out. But anyway, to maybe drink a glass of water, drink some pure spring water, and then I start eating more and more. And it gets to a point where my body's really humming and I feel it's really good. And a lot of times the spine starts vibrating. Then you can feel the vibration of your spine healing your body. And it's like getting up from this, I don't know, being physically healed, because you can feel yourself breathing and holding your breath for a second or two against your spine and watching your breath go up and down your spine and breathing deep in your breath going up and down your spine. And it's like Quetzalcoatl's healing you or something. And then all of a sudden you're in this spiral, or you see Quetzalcoatl coming. And it's like this type millennium energy was just, that's why they call it the rainbow plumed serpent. All these people have the oldest civilizations, the Olmecs and the Mayans got Quetzalcoatl drawn in caves. And you can easily, this book we're talking about, the Yuta Tnoho Codex, this goes into from a religion way back to then, because the Toltecs either conquered or interacted and became friends with the Mayans. And it was supposedly Quetzalcoatl, a human king that invented this ceremony, went down there and started Culiacan. And the Mayans started Culiacan from this because of the original Toltec king. And he ended war between tribes, and he ended human sacrifice in Teotihuacan, in the area there. He had it all built. All that great architect came from one man, all those ideas and artistic things. And then the Toltecs got mad at him because he says, I'm going to share it with all the other tribes around here. And he was sharing his knowledge with all the other tribes, and they were getting upset. and they were going to drive him out. So that's why he went south to the Mayans and uh, introduced the Culiacan. That's her language. That's Maya. That's Maya for Quetzalcoatl, the white plumed serpent. So in the next scene, you see the trough where the world isn't, the reeds are loose again, but there's dancing below the six time type of persons that can meet you and help you, like Lady Four Eagle. There's all sorts of different names of them, but this is a shamanic dance. This is a dance of witchcraft.
Are we on the top left now?
We're sort of in the middle left when he's diving in.
Okay.
See the guy diving in, his head diving into the trough?
Yes.
Okay. He's going into the underworld for two purposes: to recover his ancestral heritage, like where Quetzalcoatl said to open this world to him. And you see a very special symbol there. This is a symbol of the onset of the mushroom time when it starts. And from a mushroom time, it's the A with the squashed O, and below it is a flint with all these beads going underneath the flint, like to the right. I mean, to the left side, really, and above, there's some beads that are headed toward the guy who's done the shamanic dance to go into the underworld. And when he comes out at the bottom, there's also a special sort of symbol for the peak of the experience of when you settle into the mushroom, like when you've entered into the land of the tree of life, and the singing pyramid of the sun arises from the earth. And what you're seeing there, it's really wild. It's Quetzalcoatl is called Lord Two Face here. Notice he has two faces.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he has two faces, and he has the 5-petal node of Venus on his head. The nodes, because they really considered and understood that the rotation of Venus and the 2,600 year rotation of the sun in it, orbit in its orbit in the solar system, and the orbit of Venus around the sun, which was a 5-petaled 8-year event. And then there was 3 nodes of Venus each day on the Earth, and that's being represented by Quetzalcoatl mushrooms. Like the mushrooms have the relationship to Venus when they're shaped like that. Okay, you see him holding his hand there up, and his staff is below, and he was a special avatar. He shape shifted into a special avatar, and you have become him. Now, the interesting thing, directly across from him, you see a jaguar, which is Talak, with him pointing his finger up. You know that you have ascended. You've ascended to the singing pyramid of the sun, but actually it's Talak who shapeshifted into. It's Quetzalcoatl shapeshifted into Talak. That may seem weird to you, but they considered that Quetzalcoatl, he's shapeshifted, and that's happened to me. I've been in this temple before where I entered into both of them at the same time in a healing ceremony. It was absolutely incredible. It's something I just did at a request for a friend, and I never expected. The thing came right up out of the ground. And it was an amazing ceremony. And in this ceremony, you can see below the balance of the feet on the 4 directions. So you see the ball's in balance now. His foot is balanced instead of just floating wildly in the pond up above, or the lake up above the Yuta Tnoho River.
Mm-hmm.
And down below, it's still open to the underworld. That crevice is still open to the underworld anytime they're ready to do it now. But you also have the 3 reeds tied together. Remember I told you yesterday about how the 3 reeds are tied together, but there's another hand in there because you're always tying reeds together. You don't ever get there. You're tying reeds together all the time, I guess, until you turn into compost and become a reed, right?
Right. So this would then essentially it would mark a transition in the sense that you've gone through this shamanic work, you've entered into the underworld, you've tied the reeds of your past together, within the present and attaining balance. But of course, the future is still coming, so there are more reeds that are going to need to be tied. So in other words, this is an ongoing process of transformation, an ongoing process of healing, an ongoing process of becoming, that there's always becoming.
And what Quetzalcoatl taught was really weird. He taught that he just told the people, you're going to fluctuate through life in pain and love. That said, you're going to have all sorts of love in your life, and you're going to have all sorts of pain. He says, so figure it out right now and start enjoying it. Just enjoy that you're here above the earth and that you're playing this game. Just enjoy it. And he warned a lot of people, especially about knowledge, because he said he had a comment about knowledge, and he was talking about the sacred knowledge and knowing stuff and everything. That he used to say that you have to be incredibly humble. It's really dangerous for a person to think that like this knowledge belongs to him or he's giving it out, or you know what I mean? You have to be incredibly, because you might go on, I've been on a VI with somebody who's in terrible shape, and I learned something about my life in that ceremony from that person. 90% of it was just getting the shit that had happened in her childhood out of her, And then when that got out physically, she went into sort of like the dreamland of Teo Nanakata, where she rewrote what her life was about, what everything that happened meant. It's all a blessing, right? That's the start of the ceremony. You're blessing whatever for your past life and whatever happened and what happened in the future. And then when you get into the ceremony, you're of this type of thing, you're demanding stuff. You're putting incantations and stuff and asking what the trade-off is here, what's going on, But this ceremony at the bottom technically means that the sun has become a conductor, and it's the sun coming up in the morning of the first dawn of your life. The first dawn of your life, the first dawn of the civilization is coming up, and the sun is the conductor at the tree of life of all the birds, and all the birds are singing in the tree. And the pyramid, which you can go up, is called the Pyramid of the Sun. And the reason it's called the Pyramid of the Sun is because it is the great conductor of life on earth, not as a god, but as a living emanation force in nature. You know what I mean? Just like you call Hurricane Donna. If we give it a name as an avatar that we knew to talk about her, we don't think that name is Hurricane Donna. I've been in Hurricane Donna. I know what Hurricane Donna was like, but it's still that super power force of nature.
Right.
And this is what you're tapping into when you have these emanations and you see weaving between people, this type of weaving, and the three different types of emanations, the bouncing type of emanations, and the people see it between plants, people see it between animals and plants, or especially between plants and people. And that's what the weaving type of it. That's why they considered women who wove to be sorcerers. Really, I'm not kidding you. They considered people that had weaving skills to be sorcerers because they considered they were putting that into what they were weaving. That goes beyond Western thinking, it's a whole different world of way, because they expect the ancestral family to heal whoever has a problem. And the spirits of the past, within the plant that have been of service to the family for histories, And thank God some people have special talents. I mean, Beth Williams wrote an incredible article about talents of Maria Sabina. Besides being special with the mushroom, she had poetic talents, of which Howard Munn talks about the uniqueness of how the shaman, the words sprang forth without any thinking about it, So, and that's when she references back to this book and some of her ceremonies that were recorded by Wasson when they're translated. She's referencing back to the book.
This Yuta Tnoho Codex.
Do that, but everybody knew about it. But the sacred sages that had it, they were called the old cracklers. And the reason they were called the old cracklers was because when they moved these old deer skin pages, they would make crackling sounds in the temple. because it was accordion-like. It wasn't like an American book. It was well, you think of it as it's a book that's accordion-like, right?
And so now you have used this with people. So maybe you could share a little bit about that from your side of sharing this with others and the experiences that they've been having, kind of following this map, following this model of using these mushrooms in this way and using the codex itself.
Yeah, I've only given the codex that I've made the big size one to maybe 3 or 4 people. George Lake and Jenna Lake, at their wedding, and to Acacia Lewis, who you met, the beautiful young lady, Acacia Lewis, and also you talked to Rose Marie. I think I'm sending one to her. I've sent stuff to her about it. But those, Acacia and Jesse or Jessica Marie, they took the mushroom just exactly like I said, is in this codex. And the thing of it is, everybody, a guru and everybody can promise you all sorts of stuff, right? You're going to enter nirvana, you're going to get this or that, right? All I'm saying, if you take the mushrooms this way, dried or in honey, but this is a method that if you do it, you'll find out for yourself, It's like me telling you, oh, there's a canoe down by the creek. Somebody left paddles in it. I'd suggest you get in the boat. And if you're in the boat, you probably should use the paddles. That's about all I do.
So this work here, the codex, this is the canoe and the paddle.
When you turn into Quetzalcoatl, when you make that motion, when you're actually turning into Quetzalcoatl, it's around everybody that's there. I did in Goblin Valley in Utah one time with a guy that had been in a motorcycle accident, and it was amazing. It was like myself, and especially him, was swallowed up inside a huge monster snake of rainbow light that was twisting and spinning in spirals. It was just twisting and spinning in spirals. It was unbelievable. I mean, it's like all these diamond jeweled bracelets. He comes in so many different ways, but it's always with the colors of the rainbow. It's that energy. It's that life force, which I think is the same life force that comes out of when a person's born, when it comes out of the hand of creation, when a baby's born. It's that pure energy, or like a bud springing up. It's like when the thing has been turned to what I told you, a tertiary quid, where you have male and female, but are life, death, that you've added a separate thing to this. You've added it to the male, female becoming a serpent, the female all-seeing eye, disembodied dragon eye, and the serpent of the earth, combining to heal humans, in what they need and what they're calling for, what they're asking for. This is like a plant that has an interaction with individual people, all people, and individual people especially. I've seen people have all sorts of powers. I know a guy that could just holographically travel and astral travel. And I asked him to explain it to me, and he said, I just can't explain. I can't explain. There's no verbal explanation of how this happens.
So these are the kinds of potentials that then get unlocked through these ritual use of the mushrooms? Right.
And the main thing that you learn very quickly, and it becomes really scary, and it becomes really, the mushroom shows you right away certain paths, and certain people that don't want to change, that want to keep doing what they're doing. It doesn't make a judgment on them, but they know they don't want to come back again wanting to change and deal with what they dealt with before, okay? But then it becomes heavier if anybody ever gets on an ego trip, because that's when the balance comes from the other side, if you know what I mean. Use of the codexes was to interact with the forces that exist in the sky and the earth, the forces of nature. And it's sometimes when I do a ceremony with people with mushrooms, we're sitting there close to noon, and I'm sitting the cacao was long ago, and all of a sudden I just feel those forces, and I just start eating them.
Hmm.
And there's an ancient ceremony where you drop a little of your own blood onto dried mushrooms, and it's amazing. They spring up. I eat about the first 10 to 20 grams just dipped in honey. And the only thing I'm doing in between is drinking water. But a lot of this just depends on the ceremony. The longest ceremony I was in recently, I was trying to heal somebody, and I felt like he was healed, that had just lost his wife. And the most amazing part of the ceremony was the woman was in me just letting her sister and son play out in the yard. And I told him just to watch that. Watch them playing out in the yard, really playing, to feel the presence of her still with him and around him, and that life was still there, that all this is going on. And it was so fun. And it was that little kid playing and his sister playing that really did all the healing. Because the mushroom was directing them and putting the energy into them. They hadn't even taken anything. They were just playing, like kids play in a yard.
And that's actually something that you've mentioned a few times, this idea of kind of the joyfulness of all of this. And also in some of the things that you sent me to read, really focusing on entering into this with a state of play, a sense of joyfulness, a sense of celebration, even in that balance of the beautiful things in life and the horrible things in life, the growth and the destruction, the life and the death, but to enter into it with a joyous heart. And so is that then the deified heart is one that is able to react in balance?
There's 40,000 neurons around your heart. Just the same neurons that are in your brain. People tell you there's neurons all around that are identical to what's in your brain. And these 40,000 neurons around your heart, and there's more nerve links going to your brain than into your spine. And what happens is when you become the mushroom, you go into monosynaptic reflexes. And what that means is your brain's whacked out of the picture. Your brain becomes an observer. The conscious and unconscious become an observer. But the monosynaptic reflexes is, take for an example, it's cat-like motions like a panther. And that happens especially when your eye's nictitating membrane pulls back and it loses the muscle tension on your eyeballs. I mean, Schultes and Albert Hoffman, who found psilocybin and invented LSD, wrote about this in a 1972 book. It's simple medical terms if you look them up, but it's all this that creates this motion, that creates this in the body, which is why great athletes work so hard that when they go on the field, they don't have to remember what to do. It's all, like body movement. It's body memory. Mm-hmm. But the motion, the impulse is coming from the outside into the body, going into the spine and back. In other words, everything's going from the spine and body out. It's not happening with the brain. The brain's just an observer. It's like up there watching. It's not conducting anymore. The body wants to heal itself. I hate to tell you this, but the body wants to feel joy. That's why I can't believe this bullshit of taking ignorant Freudian type of people and sticking them in a room in a couch and giving them a pill and charging them $3,500 for maybe 1/8 of what I take and what a normal person probably 1/3 or third of what they take, with headphones on. And amazing people, they're into this. What McKenna taught that I liked. I liked a lot of McKenna. I'm talking about Terrence, Dennis Pine. Of Jung, the synchronicity. Your experience when you're out in the woods, that when a limb breaks when you're in a certain time space, and that limb breaks and hits the ground, or a crow makes a sound, or a bird flies. It's an affirmation of something. It's like something, a direction of what you should move on and how you should act. It's a message to you. People wait to see a sign in nature or something that tells them what to do rather than decide. They're looking for a sign to come. It's called the hand of God. It's a difference. You can put God in your heart. People today think they can live forever, and these Gnostic religions are ridiculous in that they believe they can escape death. But the whole thing of it is, there it is right there. Right there. And it's a heart-to-heart interface. the emanations between you and the time people. You may be talking verbally to them, and you may be hearing stuff in verbally, but it's the type of emanations between them, and especially between the plants and trees. And that becomes really like magical, that you could start to see it in the woods of certain plants interacting with you. For some reason, that plant likes Martin Ball and wants to have an interaction with him. For whatever reason, I don't know. It could be just curiosity. But these emanations that come out, they come from the time people too, and the people you're asking to work with you. And these codexes are all in museums in Europe. They should come back now. This one's in the Austrian Museum. And the magic of the Topali, when you start understanding the mushroom, you start understanding that these particular mushrooms have a world in themselves, this parallel world. And it was like these ancient sages who, Maria Sabina was a Tnoho woman, because she was the last bridge back to the Tnoho women. And this bridge was to connect these two worlds together, that they're two parallel worlds. It's obvious to you, or you would be nuts. You know when you do that this other world exists, right? And that's why you talk to me or somebody like me, because we verify it with each other. So if we go out in the street and tell the normal person, he doesn't think, that we're crazy. So we're a great person with normal people. But it's this movement between the worlds, this shift in the continuum, is why Western psychologists cannot understand Teonatacatl. They can't understand this world because they deny it exists. This is pantheistic monism as a reality. It's what Einstein believed in monism like this. When they asked him, there's only one European philosopher that ever had this, was Spinoza. And they asked Einstein, do you believe in God? He said, I believe in Spinoza's God. This God of all this energy, motion flowing in the earth. It's something that we can deal with the different parts of it with this. And that's what these people who develop this type of metaphysics and ontology. Metaphysics and ontology is how you see the world and how you act in the world. Your metaphysics is sort of a smaller part of philosophy, is how you come to understand what the world is. And the ontology is sort of like how you're acting on that, actually living in the world. And in this particular situation, to them, every day was a religious act. Every moment was a religious act, that they had to be in this center of balance and balance in themselves. That everything was motion, and the part about enjoying it, that was a good part. But it took work for people to learn this stuff. There's an ancient story about this woman who was a sage, a mushroom sage in the temple, and some beggar found a box of jewels. And the box of jewels he brought to her, were jewels of divination, jewels of healing this, cures, all sorts of things, right? And the guy said, I want you to teach me how to use these things in my box. And you'll see that when you go up into the temple of Quetzalcoatl, that this stuff brought out. And she simply said to him, well, you have to practice. You have to learn this over time. You have to go through all these experiences. And these are the jewels in there and blah, blah, blah. But, you can't just tell somebody these are jewels and how to use it. And he got mad and was going to kill her. And then all the forces of nature came out of the sky, the ground, the earth, the river, and tore him apart and threw him back into the earth. So this is actually a story of mythos, that the more you do this, the more you learn, right? And I do it to microdose to keep from losing my mind, to play pickleball and to keep my mind sharp rather than stuff Big Pharma sells me like a cap with honey. But I only do ceremonies at times like I feel like it's right, and especially in Florida with it raining right now. I'll probably be out in the bee fields next week. We're finally getting lots of lightning and rain. And that's when Talak, lightning, is actually entering the earth. And that's a belief of a force of the sky, of the energy, and you can feel it when it hits the earth around here. when it shakes your house. And that energy is the energy of healing. There's a story in my older book about how a woman healed a young girl, from Talak shaking the mountain with rain. But this story of that energy flowing into the earth, that's where the children of the sun grow from the blood. It's actually the sexual blood from Quetzalcoatl, who is both male and female. And like I told you the other day, a tertiary quid of more than just male and female sexual energy. It has all this rainbow, diamond, dragon, all this other energies of nature in it that the original King Quetzalcoatl discovered. He discovered in a ceremony and taught the Toltecs. And so this ceremony being relayed on, like the Salazar in a way. It's for sorcery, it's for shamanism, it's for healing. And that's the thing you won't hear anybody at MAPS talking about, which all the anthropologists are starting to talk about that are into South America. It's the time persons and the idea of these time persons. And a book will be coming out real soon from Matthew about these time persons.
To recap, we've been talking about the Yuta Tnoho Codex and about this process of working with the mushrooms to interact with these time persons, these emanations of the energies of nature that are personified and interactive within the mushroom space to help create balance and a joyful heart where the loose reeds of the past have been tied in the present and one is without judgment able to see pathways into the future and choices and behavior to walk as a person in balance between these energies of male and female creation, destruction, life and death, pleasure and pain, and all the rest of that, all the juicy bits of being human.
Yeah, they believe we came here to awaken dreaming, and that there was sort of like, they believed that there were different parts of us that went on, that there wasn't like your memory that went on, but different sections that you went on, but they believed your life was like a precious flower, that you have a little time here. And that's what the ceremony, you realize that the self-sacrifice and to help people and to be, a good citizen and to help people and help your neighbor is really what makes the difference in life. That'll make your life the happiness, because then you balance your life and you're not worshiping anything on either side and you're willing to help people if they need some help.
Yeah.
And that's your talent in this parallel world.